says going live Tuesday at 7 Bible study.
Well, it says I've been going for 24 seconds now, so should I just start?
Yeah.
All right. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the first ever.
I'm not seeing
You're not seeing it?
No. You got your audio and video.
Yep, got the audio, video on.
There we go.
Seeing me now? Okay. Sorry, folks, we're having some technical difficulties here, but appreciate you being patient with us. I'm really glad that you've joined us here, whether you're joining us live or you're joining us later on the recording for our couples group. Really excited to do this with you over the next several weeks. Looks like for the next 8 weeks, we're going to be doing a group for couples. And we've got a lot of great topics coming up, things such as attachment styles, which we'll talk about today, to things like trust and commitment, communication in relationships, building friendship in marriage. So we've got a lot of great topics that we're going to be talking about over the next 8 weeks. And I hope that you will be able to join us for those. My name is Tucker Presley. I'm a counseling intern with Joanna Ministries. Been here since last August and really enjoyed working here, working my way to becoming a licensed professional counselor. Not all the way there yet, but I'm getting there, and this is a part of the training here. So I appreciate you being a part of this group, and I hope that something will be helpful for you as we go throughout these different topics. Again, sorry about the technical difficulties there at the beginning, but hopefully this will be helpful for you. Today, we're going to be looking at attachment styles. And this is something that we can come back to over and over throughout this group. And it's kind of a good foundation. So that's what we're going to start with is attachment styles. I got some slides. Hopefully they will show up here. But we're going to be talking about attachment styles, and in particular in romantic relationships. Because again, we're focusing on couples in this group that we're going to be doing over the next several weeks. So where I'd like to start with this is just kind of looking at what attachment theory is. So attachment theory actually started back in the 1930s with a man named John Bowlby. That was kind of the beginnings of it. It wasn't until I believe like the 1960s and 70s when it really was developed further and became more well known. John Bowlby worked with a lady named Mary Ainsworth, and they together kind of developed this attachment theory. And since that time, attachment theory has been a big time fixture within mental health and counseling. And it's used by all types of clinicians and counselors and therapists. So very, very important theory. Basically, what attachment theory says is that people naturally seek strong emotional bonds. Like we want to be connected to people. That's kind of what attachment theory says. And in particular, our early bonds or lack thereof with our caregivers or our parents, those early bonds with our parents play a significant role in our relational functioning later in life. So in other words, how we connect with our parents or our caregivers early in life is going to impact us for years and years to come. And that'll come into play as we continue to go through this over and over. We'll come back to the connection with parents and caregivers here in this presentation. But because of these attachments that we have with our caregivers, are these bonds with our caregivers early in life, we develop beliefs about relationships. And the technical term is called a schema. We develop these schemas, these beliefs about relationships based on our relationships with our parents, with our caregivers that we have early in life. And so what we experience with our caregivers, our parents growing up, really shapes what we believe about relationships going forward. So it's really important how we are raised, and really important for parents to raise their children in a nurturing way. And we'll come back to that here later as well. But that's kind of what attachment theory is, basically, that we seek strong bonds, and our early bonds in life with our caregivers play a role in later relational functioning, and in particular, in our romantic relationships. Um, so that's basically what attachment theory is. There are um, four different types of attachment. Now, depending on what you look at, there are tons of articles, tons of books, videos, podcasts about attachment. And you may have some different types of attachment, that like different resources may list different numbers of attachment styles, or they may list different titles for them. But I'm just going with what I see most often and what I think is easiest to explain and to show an audience. So these are the four types that I see most often and that are easiest to explain. So anxious attachment is one, avoidant attachment is another, disorganized attachment is a third one, and the final one is secure attachment. Anxious, avoidant, and disorganized attachment are what we would call insecure types of attachment. These are ones that people tend to have struggles with in relationships. And what we want to work to is this secure attachment. So let me go ahead and say this too, that if you are anxious, avoidant, or disorganized, you're not always stuck there. You can work towards secure attachment. You can develop better ways of relating in a relationship. So you're not always stuck. And in fact, some people actually may bounce between some, or may have some parts of different types of attachment. But generally speaking, people kind of fall in one category or another. So we're going to talk about each of these four attachment styles in more detail here. Um, the first one we'll talk about is anxious attachment style. So anxious attachment style, people who have this attachment tend to desire close relationships. They really want to be in a close, intimate relationship, but they worry about that relationship with their partner. They're constantly overthinking it. They're constantly worrying, is my partner committed? Is my partner really in this with me? Um, Again, that's why it's called anxious, because they're constantly anxious about the relationship. So they want the closeness, but they're anxious about their partner because they tend to fear abandonment and being alone. This is their greatest fear. People who have anxious attachment, their greatest fear is being alone or being abandoned, and so they're constantly trying to make sure that doesn't happen. And so they may come off as clingy or needy to their partners, because they may constantly reach out for reassurances from their partner. They may constantly want um, to be around their partner or in touch with their partner, like texting all day long, or trying to constantly communicate with them. Because again, they're anxious. They're worried about the relationship and they fear abandonment. They want that close intimacy, but they're scared of that not being there, the intimacy not being there for them. So why this happens is because their relationship with their parents growing up was inconsistent. Typically, people who have anxious attachment had parents who were inconsistent, meaning that their parents sometimes were there for them and were nurturing and were loving, but at other times they weren't. And so it was kind of a inconsistent thing. So, for example, think about a child, like a child crying, a child who has a dirty diaper or is hungry or something, and they're crying out for their parent. Well, a parent may have responded to that child and changed their diaper, or given them some food, or helped them through whatever they were struggling with at times. But at other times, they may have just let them continue to cry and continue to to sit in the dirty diaper, to continue to struggle with whatever they're struggling with. And so the kid gets this idea that, okay, I don't know if my parents going to be here with me or not. Like, I don't know if they're going to be there for me or not. Sometimes they are, but sometimes they're not. And so you can see how that would lead to an anxious attachment style, because the child never really knows if their parent is going to be there for them. And you can kind of see how that plays into this anxious attachment, that they're worried about their partners in romantic relationships later in life. They're worried, is this person going to be there for me? My parent wasn't always. Sometimes they were, sometimes they weren't. And so they worry about that in their relationships. So that's the anxious attachment style. And that one is um, not, I don't think it's the most common one, but it definitely does happen. Avoidant. I saw a another PowerPoint presentation when I was preparing for this, that had a little survey, and most people that this person had surveyed were avoidant. They had the avoidant attachment style, and so this attachment style, people tend to be emotionally distant. They do not really want to get close. It's kind of the opposite of the anxious attachment style. So they're emotionally distant. They tend to avoid intimacy. When things get too close, they kind of withdraw. They may pull away, because they're like afraid of commitment and afraid of getting deep into a relationship. These people also tend to be independent, right? They're more able to handle not being around their partner all the time. So, someone who has an anxious attachment style, they want to be around their partner all the time. They feel like they've got to have them, just got to be around them. But somebody with an avoidant attachment style, they're okay being by themselves. They're okay not being with their partner all the time. And because of all these things, being emotionally distant, avoiding intimacy, being independent, they may come off as uninterested or disengaged from the relationship, maybe seem like they don't really care. Um, and so this is kind of the avoidant attachment. Now, why that happens is because their relationship with their parents growing up can be characterized as distant, that their parents were distant. They may have been there physically, but they weren't really there for them emotionally, mentally. They weren't very nurturing. They may have had this idea that, okay, my kid needs to toughen up and be independent. And so that may have been whether what their relationship was like with their parents. And so they get this idea, that from their parents, that, hey, this is what relationships are like, to be avoidant, to be distant, and that's kind of how this avoidant attachment style develops. So those are the first two. The most troublesome, and this is the one that probably doesn't happen as much, but again, it definitely does happen, is the disorganized attachment style. And the disorganized attachment is actually kind of a combination of the two that we just talked about. Combination of anxious and avoidant. They kind of bounce between anxious and avoidant styles. That's why it's called disorganized, because it's not really one single attachment style. It's kind of bouncing between those anxious and avoidant styles. So what these people tend to do is they tend to desire strong connection. They want to be in a strong relationship. They crave it, like the anxious attachment style do, but they simultaneously fear commitment and intimacy like the avoidance do. So they want to be in relationships, they want the love and the nurturing, but they're afraid of it. They're afraid of that commitment. They're afraid of diving in fully. And so it's really tough that they want it, but at the same time, they're afraid of it. And the reason why this happens is because their relationship with their parents growing up was characterized by fear. They were afraid of their parents. And typically, um, abuse and neglect is involved here. Not all the time, because there could be other reasons why a child fears their parent or their caregiver. But most of the time, some type of abuse, some type of neglect, something like that was going on. And so, again, we naturally seek connection, and when we're when we're babies, like we want to be attached to our parents. Like that's just who we go after. It's a natural thing that everybody does. But sometimes parents aren't always what they should be. They're not always nurturing and loving and a good attachment figure. And in fact, sometimes they're the exact opposite, where they may hurt a child purposefully, may hit the child, may neglect their needs, may not feed them or take them to the doctor or whatever it may be. And so a child gets really, really confused here because, again, naturally they want the love from their parent, but at the same time, they're scared of their parent. That they're afraid that, okay, my parent's going to hurt me. My parent's not going to take care of me. And so they develop this disorganized attachment style where they want the parent. The parent is that source of love, but the parent is also a source of fear and hurt. And so this is a very tough position to be in, really sad situation. But some people do fall into this disorganized attachment style. And typically these people end up in high conflict relationships down the line. So again, this is not the most popular or the most the biggest attachment style where people are most in this category, but it does happen. It does happen. People getting into this attachment style. The last one is the one that we want to work towards, and where a lot of people do find themselves is in secure attachment style. These people tend to be comfortable in relationships. They rely on their partner, but they also allow their partner to rely on them. They're completely comfortable with that, with trusting in somebody and allowing somebody to trust in them. They tend to be affectionate, tend to be trustworthy, and committed in the relationship. And so these people, again, they're comfortable in a relationship. Um, they these people also who are secure, they're comfortable in a relationship, but they're also comfortable being independent. Like they love to be around their partner, they want to be around their partner, but they're also okay if their partner's not around all the time. They're okay spending some time alone, being independent. Um, it's not that they want that all the time, but it's not something that bothers them. And again, with the anxious and avoidant, these things are not that way. Why this happens, why somebody develops a secure attachment is typically because their relationship with their parents growing up was very good. It was characterized by security. Their parents provided them security. Their parents were attuned to their needs. They were very nurturing and they were responsive. Whenever they needed something, their parents were there and they met their needs. And because of that, they formed a healthy idea of what a relationship is like. They formed a secure attachment with their mom and their dad. And because of that, that's carried on to their romantic relationships. And they're comfortable in relationships and they carry those things that they learned from their parents into romantic relationships later in life. So those are the four attachment styles. Again, different resources may name them a little bit differently or may have one less attachment style. But these are the ones that I wanted to go with. I think is the easiest to explain it that way. Um, Again, whatever attachment style you're in, you can work out of that. In fact, even if you're in a secure attachment, I think it's possible for you to fall into some avoidant things or anxious attachment. But you also can work to secure attachment. And we'll talk more about that here in just a minute. But I did want to show you a couple of things. Something that's really interesting is the anxious avoidant trap. So a lot of people fall into anxious and avoidant categories, the anxious avoidant styles. Interestingly enough, people with anxious attachment style and avoidant attachment style tend to end up in relationships together. It's really interesting that they do, but they actually kind of play into each other's attachment style. And so they kind of almost draw each other to each other. So, but what ends up happening is they fall into this unhealthy cycle or this trap, the anxious avoidant trap. So what ends up happening is typically at the beginning of a relationship, you're really invested with a person. Like you really like them. You're kind of riding a high. Sometimes we call it the infatuation stage, right? Like things are going really well. You feel like you're in love and you really like the person. And that's typically how relationships start off. Um, but then avoidant partners, they start to realize that things are getting a little too close, or that their partner is anxious. They have an anxious attachment style, and they're being a little bit too needy and too clingy. And what that makes the avoidant partner do is withdraw, because they see the partner being a little bit too clingy, or a little bit too needy, or a little bit too pushy, or a little bit too invested in the relationship. And remember, avoidant partners, they're afraid of commitment. They're afraid of intimacy. And when they see that coming, they withdraw as the relationship gets closer. Well, what does that cause the anxious person to do? Well, that causes them to be really anxious, because they're wondering, okay, what's my partner doing? Why is my partner withdrawing? What's going on here? And so they start to pursue harder, or try to pursue getting their attention even harder. And then eventually there's a short-lived reconciliation that takes place between the partners, and then the cycle repeats itself. Um, there's just this repeat of kind of push and pull, where the avoidant partner withdraws, the anxious partner pursues them, they kind of reconcile, and then the cycle repeats itself over and over again. And it's a really unhealthy pattern. But that's kind of the anxious avoidant trap. And they kind of draw each other to one another, and they kind of feed their core beliefs as well, play into their core beliefs. So anxious and avoidant people tend to end up with each other quite often. One thing that's really important also to note about this is something called protest behavior. Protest behavior is typically something employed by anxious people with anxious attachment style. I guess it's possible for anybody to do this. But what protest behavior is unhealthy behaviors aimed at winning a partner's affection or attention. Something that is not really good, not really healthy, but you're trying to draw their significant other's attention. You're trying to get them to pay attention to you. And so you think about what we just talked about with the anxious avoidant trap. When the avoidant person withdraws, an anxious person might engage in protest behavior to try to draw their attention, try to draw their affections again. And so some examples of this would be like intentionally picking fights, like engaging in an argument with them, because, it's, at least you're getting some type of connection with them. At least you're getting something out of them. Maybe it's constant texting or calling, making threats to leave the relationship, stonewalling, which is, refusing to kind of respond. And there's other protest behavior, but it's really unhealthy. It's something when somebody feels threatened, they engage in protest behavior, and sometimes they may not even realize that they're engaging in protest behavior. It's just something that may happen subconsciously. It's something that they feel threatened, they immediately engage in this protest behavior. But it really actually damages the relationship in the long run, because I mean, you think about these things, these picking fights intentionally, and maybe calling and texting all the time, making threats. Those things don't really build up a relationship. It may draw attention in the short term, but in the long term, it really is unhealthy and really doesn't help. And so you have to find ways to really engage a little bit better, and to not engage in protest behavior. Um, and that's really what we want to talk about next. Like, um, how can we find secure attachment? Like, how can we actually um, get to the point where we're in a healthy relationship, and we're not anxious, we're not avoidant, we're not disorganized? Like, where can we get to that point? And here's the thing: you may not get there fully, but maybe you can adopt at least some of these things that will help you in your relationships, your romantic relationships. So, um, one thing, here's this slide here that has them all. Um, Creating secure attachment. So, number one, seek counseling. Joanna Snow Ministries, Really Living Today, we provide counseling to couples. I mean, just about every clinician here that I know of sees couples and sees individuals. So you could seek counseling individually or with your significant other. I think either way, you could really get some help with your attachment style. We talk about that with individuals and with couples. And I've seen a lot of couples. I've seen a lot of individuals, and I've used attachment styles with both individuals and couples. But this could really help you uncover a lot, and really just it's really good. One thing I've heard from a lot of clients is just being able to talk to somebody about what's going on can be helpful. And so, to help you create secure attachment, a counselor can work through that with you and help you through this journey of your, maybe if you have anxious attachment or a avoidant attachment or disorganized attachment, maybe helping you through trauma. We've got a lot of counselors here, a lot of great counselors. So you might want to seek counseling, and it could be really really helpful for this. Also, learning about your attachment style. You've done that today. If you watch this uh, live stream or you're watching it later, you learned about your attachment style, and this just makes you a little bit more aware. And I would challenge you to keep studying. In fact, I would draw you to a website, and I've forgotten it right now off the top of my head, but there's a website. Just type in online attachment style quiz, and you can go on there and take a quiz, and it will give you your attachment style. You'll answer like it takes like 5 minutes. I took one yesterday myself, and you can take a quiz, and it will give you your results about what your attachment style likely is. And it'll ask you questions about your childhood. It'll ask you questions about your mom, your dad. It'll ask you questions about your romantic relationships you've been in before, and it'll give you your attachment style. And I think it's called the Attachment Project is the one that I'm thinking of. But it's really great, really helpful. And just learning about it, it helps you become a little bit more aware of where you are, and a little bit more learn. You can learn a little bit more about what these attachment styles are and how people act, and so that could be really helpful, especially learning about secure attachment, working your way to that. Also, similarly, examine your beliefs about relationships. So again, like what we learn as kids, we carry over uh, later in life. We develop these schemas, these beliefs about relationships. And so it might be helpful for you to sit down and to examine your beliefs about your relationships. Just sit down and jot down, okay, what do I believe? What is my core belief about relationships? What do I believe about engaging in a relationship with a significant other? Am I avoidant? Am I anxious? What do I believe about relationships in general? And that might be helpful too, again, to create more awareness about your beliefs and about what you think about relationships. So that could be very helpful. Next, increasing emotional awareness and emotional regulation. So what ends up happening with anxious and avoidant and disorganized is typically the emotions take over, and they're not able to regulate their emotions, or they're not aware that their emotions are really out of control. And so something that could really help is for you to increase your emotional awareness, come to understand how emotions affect you, how emotions play into your relationships and how you think and how you feel, and also come to terms with how to regulate your emotions. When you're feeling really anxious, how can you regulate? How can you self-regulate? How can you bring yourself back down? Or when you're frustrated, when you're angry, when you're feeling abandoned, how can you regulate? How can you self-regulate? And there are several things you can do, like breathing exercises, grounding exercises, and maybe we can talk some more about those things down the line. But just increase that emotional awareness, and your emotional regulation can be really, really helpful. Um, and we have these little pillows around here that we'll talk about the feelings wheel. What are some things that we're feeling, and kind of helping clients identify what they're feeling and become aware of their feelings and their emotions. So that could be really helpful to increase your emotional awareness and regulation in your relationships. Also, communicate openly and listen empathetically. Um, again, what ends up happening with anxious, avoidant, disorganized, the communication isn't always open, and you may think you're communicating right, but really you're not communicating openly, and you may be keeping things from your significant other, or you may not be really letting things out like you're supposed to, and be honest with them, and you may not listen empathetically. Again, meaning really trying to understand your partner's perspective. That's so very important in any relationship, is really trying to listen and understand where your partner's coming from. That can help tremendously. If you're, in a relationship with someone who is anxious or avoidant, trying to see it from their point of view, really taking it in their viewpoint into consideration, and being open with them yourselves. Talking with them and being honest about how you feel and who you are. That is so very important in any relationship. So communicate openly, listen empathetically. Also, something really important is to seek out couples with healthy relationships. This is this is so very important. You can find examples of couples who are secure, who are in healthy relationships, who love each other, who depend on each other, but are also somewhat independent. But they love one another. They're committed. They're not afraid of intimacy. They're not always worrying about where their significant other is and what they're doing. They there are couples out there that are prime examples for you to look at. And so I would stress to you to try to find a couple that can be an example for you. Maybe it's your maybe it's some friends that you have. Maybe it's some family members who have a really close relationship. Talk with them, learn from them, meet with them, go on a double date with them, and just see how they interact. But seek out an example couple, a couple that has a healthy relationship. You can learn a lot from a real living example of a secure attachment. That's really important. Also, minimizing stress. This is easier said than done, but when we're really stressed out, that's only going to hurt us in the long run, and to play into anxious attachment style, or an avoidant attachment style, or disorganized. And even those with secure attachment, when we're really stressed out, we can maybe have some unhealthy patterns. So minimizing stress is so very important, and that's where I would go back again to seeking counseling, doing some regulating, like breathing exercises, grounding techniques. Those are really it's really important to minimize your stress. Also, seek those out with secure attachment. Date people, get in relationships with people who have secure attachment. Um, you know, we didn't really talk about what it's like to be in a relationship with someone who is secure. Like if an anxious person dates someone who's secure, or avoidant dates someone who's secure. Um, doesn't always work out, but you can learn. Someone who's anxious can learn from someone who's secure, and start to develop those things. There start to develop some of those things that are in a secure attachment style. Someone who's not afraid of commitment, intimacy. You can learn from them. Now, it could also happen the other way, where someone with secure attachment could be overcome with, let's just say, someone who's avoidant and is so distant, and they don't want complete distance. And so, but what I'm trying to say is that seek out somebody, date those with secure attachment, and you can learn from them, and you can grow with them, and become secure yourself, and learn some patterns in relationships that are healthy. And so there's a really good book out there about attachment styles simply called Attached by Amir Levine. And he talks about some of this stuff, all of this stuff. But that's one resource that I would give to you. Um, there's a lot of really good videos, and a lot of really good podcasts out there that at least talk about it on one episode or two episodes. Again, good videos, articles out there. I think again, it's called the Attachment Project. It has a lot of really good stuff. But keep studying on this, and you can really learn and develop some secure attachment. You're not always stuck if you're an anxious or avoidant. But let me finish by saying this: for those of you who are parents or will become parents, attachment theory shows so clearly the importance of parenting, uh, how we're raising our kids, how we're interacting and nurturing our kids is directly going to impact them for years to come, right? I'm not trying to say you have to be perfect because no parent is perfect, right? No one's perfect. We make mistakes with kids, we make mistakes all the time. But being there for your kids, being responsive, being nurturing and loving, and being there for them, providing security, it really will have a great impact on them for years to come. And so be there for your kids, nurture them, love them, provide security for them. Again, you're not going to be perfect, but parenting is so very important. So many things that we learn, it starts in the home. And we carry that with us throughout our lives. And so, parents, it's really, really important the way you're raising your kids. And so, I would challenge you to engage in healthy parenting and talk with your kids about these things. Be open and honest with your kids, but be loving, be nurturing, be there for them, and you could really, really impact them for in a positive way for years and years to come. Well, that's all I've got. I really appreciate you joining and listening here to this presentation. And I hope that you will spread the word to your friends and loved ones and come back next week at the same time. We're going to be moving on to another topic. And again, this is going to be going on for the next 8 weeks. And so I hope you will come and be a part of this and learn about relationships. And you can grow in your relationship and hopefully take something with you from each of these sessions. But really appreciate you joining in again, and look forward to talking with you all next week. Take care.